The metallic click of handcuffs echoed through the courthouse hallway like a gunshot, freezing every conversation, every footstep, every breath. 12-year-old Corey Williams stood motionless against the marble wall, his small wrists now encircled by cold steel, his eyes wide with confusion and terror. The granola bar he'd been eating lay crumbled on the pristine floor, its wrapper fluttering like a dying butterfly in the sterile air conditioning. This is what happens when you think you can just take whatever you want. Officer Hoan Nguyen's voice cut through the silence, sharp and unforgiving. Her badge caught the fluorescent light as she adjusted her utility belt, savoring the weight of her authority. Resources aren't free, kid. Someone has to pay for every crumb you put in your mouth. The boy's mother, Maria Williams, rushed forward from the wooden bench where she'd been waiting, her heels clicking urgently against the polished stone. "He's just hungry. We've been here since 7 this morning, waiting for our hearing. I gave him that snack." Her voice cracked with desperation, hands reaching toward her son before stopping short, knowing better than to interfere with an officer's actions. Corey had awakened that morning with butterflies churning in his stomach, not from hunger, but from the weight of the day ahead. The custody hearing would determine where he'd live, who he'd call home, which parent would tuck him in at night. He dressed carefully in his best khakis and button-down shirt, the one his grandmother had ironed with such precision that the creases could cut paper. His mother had packed a small bag with snacks, knowing the courthouse waited for no one, especially not a hungry 12-year-old. The Jefferson County Courthouse stood like a monument to justice, its neoclassical columns reaching toward a sky that seemed perpetually gray in this part of the city. Inside, families clustered on hard wooden benches, their voices creating a low hum of anxiety and hope. Children fidgeted in their Sunday best, while parents checked phones obsessively. Lawyers shuffled papers with practiced efficiency, and court officers maintained order with watchful eyes. Corey had been one of many children that morning, but his size made him stand out in ways that made him uncomfortable. At 12, he carried the weight of a boy who'd found comfort in food during his parents' bitter divorce, who'd learned that a full stomach could sometimes quiet the screaming matches echoing through thin apartment walls. His mother had tried everything: doctors, nutritionists, sports teams, but stress had a way of manifesting in a growing boy's body, and Corey bore that burden with quiet dignity. Officer Nguyen had noticed him immediately, fresh from the academy and eager to prove herself in a male-dominated profession. She'd taken the courthouse assignment seriously. Too seriously, some might say. She'd studied the building's policies with the intensity of a law student, memorizing every regulation, every procedure, every opportunity to demonstrate her competence. The courthouse cafeteria operated on a strict schedule, and outside food was technically prohibited in certain areas, though the rule was rarely enforced, especially for families facing long waits. When she'd seen Corey quietly unwrapping his granola bar, something inside her had snapped. Perhaps it was the memory of her own childhood, when her immigrant parents had impressed upon her the value of every grain of rice, every privilege earned through backbreaking work. Perhaps it was the pressure she felt as the only Asian American officer in her unit, the need to prove she wasn't soft, wasn't sympathetic to the wrong people. Or perhaps it was simply the intoxicating rush of power that came with the badge, the uniform, the authority to make decisions that would echo through someone else's life. "Ma'am, step back," Officer Nguyen commanded, her hand moving instinctively to her radio. "Your son was consuming unauthorized food in a restricted area. This is a violation of courthouse policy and potentially theft of public resources." The words hung in the air like smoke from a fire, acrid and suffocating. Other families began to take notice, conversations dying mid-sentence as they turned to witness the unfolding drama. An elderly Hispanic man in a worn suit shook his head slowly, muttering under his breath in Spanish. Two teenage girls pressed against their mother, eyes wide with disbelief. A young father instinctively pulled his toddler closer, as if the officer's actions might somehow be contagious. Mrs. Chen, a family court mediator who'd worked in the building for 15 years, approached cautiously. "Officer, perhaps we could discuss this more privately. The boy was just—" "Ma'am, I need you to step back as well. This is an official matter." Officer Nguyen's voice had taken on a robotic quality, as if she were reading from a script she'd memorized. Resources are limited, and when people take what isn't theirs, it affects everyone. This young man needs to learn that actions have consequences. Corey's eyes filled with tears, but he held them back with the stoicism of a boy who'd learned early that crying only made things worse. His wrists were starting to ache from the tight metal, and he could feel the stares of everyone in the hallway burning into his skin. The shame was worse than the physical discomfort, worse than the fear of what might happen next. He'd been trying so hard to be good, to be the kind of son who didn't cause problems, who didn't make his mother's life any harder than it already was. "This is ridiculous," muttered James Peterson, a local attorney who'd been representing families in this courthouse for 2 decades. He'd seen his share of petty power plays, but this crossed every line of decency and common sense. "That boy hasn't done anything wrong. He's not stealing. He's eating a snack his mother packed for him during a long wait." Officer Nguyen's jaw tightened. "Sir, I'm going to ask you to mind your own business. This is a matter of courthouse security and resource allocation. When people bring outside food into the building, it creates additional cleanup costs, potential pest problems, and sets a precedent that others will follow. Someone has to maintain order here." The crowd was growing now, drawn by the commotion like metal filings to a magnet. Cell phones emerged from pockets and purses, their cameras capturing every moment of the surreal scene. A teenager with bright purple hair live-streamed the confrontation on social media, her commentary sharp and incredulous. "Y'all, this is insane. This cop just handcuffed a 12-year-old for eating a granola bar. This is what we're calling law enforcement now." The courthouse security footage would later show Officer Nguyen's face, cycling through a range of emotions: determination, uncertainty, defensive anger, and finally, a growing awareness that she'd stepped into something far bigger than she'd anticipated. But in that moment, with dozens of eyes upon her, and her authority being questioned, she doubled down on her decision with the stubbornness of someone who'd painted herself into a corner. "This is about more than a snack," she announced to the growing crowd, her voice carrying over the marble and stone. "This is about teaching respect for rules, for authority, for the institutions that keep our society functioning. If we let one person slide, where does it end pretty soon? Everyone thinks they can do whatever they want, whenever they want, wherever they want." But her words were falling on increasingly hostile ears. A young mother clutching her infant stepped forward, her voice trembling with righteous indignation. "That's a child. He's not some criminal mastermind. He's a scared kid eating a snack during the most stressful day of his life. Have you completely lost your humanity?" The social media response was immediate and explosive. Within minutes, the live-streamed video had been shared across multiple platforms, gathering views and comments at a breakneck pace. Hashtags like "Justice for Corey" and "Granola Boy Justice" began trending, accompanied by increasingly angry commentary from users around the world. The story struck a nerve that went far beyond the courthouse walls, tapping into deeper frustrations about authority, race, and the criminalization of childhood. Local news stations picked up the story within the hour, their reporters rushing to the courthouse with cameras and microphones. The parking lot filled with news vans sporting satellite dishes, their crews jockeying for position and interviews. The story had everything modern media craved in justice: drama, a sympathetic victim, and a villain who'd overplayed her hand so spectacularly that it defied belief. Inside the courthouse, the tension was reaching a breaking point. Judge Patricia Hawthorne, who'd been scheduled to hear the Williams family's custody case, received an urgent message from her clerk about the situation developing just outside her courtroom. A veteran of the bench with 30 years of experience. She'd seen plenty of drama in her career, but nothing quite like this. She made the unprecedented decision to suspend morning proceedings and investigate the situation herself. As Judge Hawthorne emerged from her chambers, her black robes flowing behind her like storm clouds, the hallway fell silent with a reverence that Officer Nguyen had never managed to command. The judge was a formidable woman in her 60s, with silver hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes that missed nothing. She'd built her reputation on fairness, wisdom, and an absolute intolerance for anything that brought dishonor to her courthouse. What exactly is happening here? Judge Hawthorne's voice carried the weight of absolute authority, the kind that made lawyers straighten their ties and defendants consider confession. Officer Nguyen, would you care to explain why a child is in handcuffs in my courthouse? Officer Nguyen felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. The crowd that had seemed threatening moments before now felt like witnesses to her professional suicide. Your Honor, the subject was consuming unauthorized food in violation of courthouse policy. When I attempted to address the situation, he became non-compliant. Corey's voice, small and frightened, cut through the tension like a blade. I wasn't non-compliant. I was just scared. I said I was sorry, and I asked if I could throw the wrapper away. That's all I said. Judge Hawthorne's expression could have frozen fire. She'd heard enough lies in her courtroom to recognize truth when it spoke, especially from the mouth of a terrified child. Officer Nguyen, remove those handcuffs immediately. This is not a discussion or a negotiation. It's a direct order. The officer's hands shook slightly as she reached for her keys, her authority crumbling like sand in an hourglass. The click of the handcuffs opening was somehow louder than when they'd closed, a sound that seemed to echo with the weight of justice deferred but not denied. Corey rubbed his wrists, the red marks already fading, but the psychological impact burned deeper than any physical wound. But the drama was far from over. As Officer Nguyen stepped back, looking smaller somehow without her moment of borrowed power, a new voice cut through the crowd. Excuse me, Your Honor, I believe I should introduce myself. The voice belonged to a young woman in a sharp navy suit, her heels clicking with purpose as she approached the group. She was beautiful in a way that commanded attention, tall and elegant, with natural hair styled in a professional twist and eyes that sparkled with intelligence and barely contained fury. The crowd parted to let her through, sensing that something significant was about to happen. My name is Jasmine Williams, and I'm an attorney with the Public Defender's Office. I'm also Corey's older sister. She placed a protective hand on her brother's shoulder, her touch gentle, but her voice steel. I've been watching this entire situation unfold, and I believe we need to have a very serious conversation about civil rights violations, abuse of authority, and the traumatization of a minor. The revelation hit the crowd like a thunderbolt. Jasmine Williams was no ordinary public defender. She was a rising star in the legal community, known for her fierce advocacy and her ability to dismantle opposing arguments with surgical precision. She'd graduated summa cum laude from law school and had already won several high-profile cases involving police misconduct. Her presence transformed the situation from a simple case of officer overreach into a potential legal earthquake. Officer Nguyen's face went pale. She'd just handcuffed the brother of one of the most formidable defense attorneys in the city, and she'd done it in front of dozens of witnesses and multiple cameras. The career she'd been so eager to protect was now hanging by a thread, and she could feel it fraying with each passing second. "Ms. Williams," Judge Hawthorne nodded with recognition and respect. "I wasn't aware you were involved in this case. I assume you'll be representing your family in the custody matter." "Actually, Your Honor, I've been consulting on the case from the beginning, though I hadn't planned to take such an active role until—" Jasmine's eyes flashed toward Officer Nguyen. "Until circumstances changed. I believe we need to address this situation immediately and thoroughly." The courthouse had become a pressure cooker, with media attention, legal implications, and public outrage all building toward an inevitable explosion. The story had already gone viral, with millions of views and thousands of comments expressing everything from disbelief to rage. Local politicians were beginning to weigh in, civil rights organizations were mobilizing, and the police department was frantically trying to manage the crisis. Judge Hawthorne made a decision that would reverberate throughout the legal community. "I'm calling an immediate recess in all proceedings. I want to see all parties involved in my chambers within the next 10 minutes. Officer Nguyen, I suggest you contact your supervisor immediately. Ms. Williams, I assume you'll be filing formal complaints." "Multiple complaints, Your Honor, federal civil rights violations, state charges for false imprisonment, and assault on a minor. And I'm considering a lawsuit against the city for inadequate training and supervision of its officers." Jasmine's voice carried the confidence of someone who'd studied every angle of the case while watching it unfold. "My brother's rights were violated in the most egregious way possible, and I intend to ensure that justice is served." The crowd erupted in applause, the sound echoing off the marble walls like thunder. Someone shouted, "Get her!" while others chanted, "Justice for Corey." The atmosphere had shifted from outrage to something approaching celebration, as if the arrival of Jasmine Williams had tipped the scales of justice back toward their proper balance. Officer Nguyen found herself surrounded by hostile faces, her radio crackling with urgent messages from her superiors who were watching the situation unfold on live television. The weight of her mistake was crushing, but she'd gone too far to back down gracefully. "I was just doing my job," she said weakly, her voice barely audible over the crowd noise. "I was trying to maintain order and enforce the rules." "Your job is to protect and serve, not to terrorize children," Jasmine responded, her professional demeanor never wavering despite the personal nature of the attack on her family. "You handcuffed a 12-year-old boy for eating a granola bar. You traumatized him. You traumatized his mother, and you've brought shame on your department and this courthouse. That's not law enforcement, that's abuse of power." The media circus outside was growing by the minute. News helicopters circled overhead, their cameras capturing aerial shots of the courthouse grounds. Protesters had begun to gather, carrying signs demanding justice for Corey and accountability for Officer Nguyen. The hashtag John Granola Boy Justice was trending nationwide, with celebrities, politicians, and ordinary citizens weighing in on the incident. Inside Judge Hawthorne's chambers, a tense meeting was taking place. The judge sat behind her imposing desk, her expression grave as she reviewed the video footage that had been quickly compiled from courthouse security cameras and social media posts. Officer Nguyen sat rigidly in her chair, her union representative beside her, while Jasmine Williams presented her case with the skill and passion that had made her reputation. "Your Honor, what we witnessed today was not an isolated incident of poor judgment. It was a systematic abuse of authority that reflects deeper problems within our law enforcement system. My brother, a child, was treated like a criminal for the simple act of eating a snack. He was handcuffed, humiliated, and traumatized in front of dozens of people. This is not about courthouse policy. This is about basic human dignity. The union representative, a grizzled veteran named Mike Torino, tried to minimize the situation. Your Honor, Officer Nguyen was enforcing legitimate courthouse policies. While the situation may have escalated beyond what was necessary, her intentions were to maintain order and security. She's a new officer, still learning the ropes. Judge Hawthorne's voice cut through the excuse-making like a sword. Mr. Torino, I've been presiding over this courthouse for 3 decades. I've seen thousands of children come through these doors, most of them during the most stressful moments of their lives. Not once, in all those years, have I seen a child handcuffed for eating a snack. This isn't about policy. It's about judgment, compassion, and basic human decency. The ripple effects of the incident were spreading far beyond the courthouse walls. The mayor's office was fielding calls from angry constituents. The police chief was scheduling emergency meetings, and civil rights organizations were mobilizing resources for what they saw as a clear case of excessive force against a minor. The story had struck a nerve that went far beyond the specific incident, tapping into broader concerns about the criminalization of childhood and the disproportionate impact of aggressive policing on communities of color. Local business owners were watching the coverage with growing concern. The courthouse was located in the heart of the downtown business district, and the negative publicity was already affecting their operations. Several restaurants had reported customers canceling lunch reservations, and the nearby hotel was dealing with guests who were checking out early rather than stay in an area that was being depicted as hostile to families. Meanwhile, Corey sat in the hallway with his mother, trying to process what had happened to him. The attention was overwhelming. Reporters kept trying to interview him. Strangers were patting his shoulder and calling him brave, and his phone was buzzing with messages from classmates who'd seen the videos online. He just wanted to go home, to hide in his room, and pretend this had never happened. "Are you okay, baby?" Maria Williams asked for the dozenth time, her hand stroking her son's hair with the desperate tenderness of a mother who'd watched her child suffer and been powerless to stop it. "I'm so sorry this happened to you. I'm so sorry I couldn't protect you." Corey looked up at his mother. This woman who'd worked 2 jobs to keep their family afloat during the divorce, who'd sacrificed everything to make sure he had opportunities she'd never had. "It's not your fault, Mom. You didn't do anything wrong." "She did." His voice was stronger now, the initial shock giving way to a growing understanding of what had happened and why it mattered. The emergency meeting in Judge Hawthorne's chambers was reaching its climax. The judge had reviewed all the evidence, heard all the arguments, and made her decision. "Officer Nguyen, your actions today were not just inappropriate. They were unconscionable. You violated the civil rights of a child. You brought negative attention to this courthouse, and you've damaged the relationship between law enforcement and the community we serve. I'm recommending your immediate suspension pending a full investigation." Officer Nguyen's career was effectively over. The video evidence was overwhelming, the public outrage was deafening, and the legal implications were severe. She'd let her desire to prove herself overcome her basic humanity, and the cost was everything she'd worked for. I was just trying to do my job," she whispered, but the words sounded hollow, even to her own ears. The courthouse had become a symbol of something larger than itself. News crews were interviewing everyone from legal experts to child psychologists, all weighing in on the broader implications of the incident. The story had sparked a national conversation about police training, racial bias, and the treatment of children in the criminal justice system. Corey Williams had become an unwitting symbol of resilience in the face of injustice, and his family had become advocates for change they'd never sought to champion. As the afternoon wore on, the formal proceedings finally resumed. Judge Hawthorne took the bench with a gravity that everyone in the courtroom could feel. The custody hearing that had brought the Williams family to the courthouse in the first place seemed almost anticlimactic after the morning's drama, but it proceeded with a new sense of purpose and dignity. The irony wasn't lost on anyone present. The system that had failed Corey so spectacularly in the hallway was now working to protect his interests in the courtroom. Judge Hawthorne's decision in the custody case reflected the same sense of justice and protection that had been so absent from Officer Nguyen's actions. Corey would live primarily with his mother, with liberal visitation rights for his father, and both parents would be required to attend co-parenting classes to ensure their son's well-being. Outside the courthouse, the media circus was beginning to wind down, but the impact of the day's events would be felt for months to come. Officer Nguyen was officially suspended without pay, pending the results of multiple investigations. The police department announced new training protocols for courthouse security, with an emphasis on de-escalation and appropriate responses to minor infractions. The City Council scheduled emergency hearings on police accountability and the treatment of juveniles in municipal buildings. Jasmine Williams had become a hero in the eyes of many, a brilliant attorney who turned a moment of family crisis into a catalyst for systemic change. She'd already received calls from national news programs, speaking engagements, and civil rights organizations seeking her involvement in similar cases. But her focus remained on her brother, on healing the trauma he'd experienced and ensuring that other children wouldn't face the same treatment. The social media response continued to grow, with brochure Granola Boy Justice becoming a rallying cry for police reform and children's rights. Celebrities shared the story, politicians called for investigations, and ordinary citizens donated to legal funds and community organizations. The incident had tapped into something deeper than anger. It had awakened a sense of collective responsibility for protecting the vulnerable and holding authority accountable. 3 weeks later, Officer Nguyen was terminated from the police force. The investigation had revealed a pattern of aggressive behavior and poor judgment in her brief career, including several previous incidents that had been swept under the rug. She faced federal civil rights charges, state criminal charges, and a civil lawsuit that would likely bankrupt her. The woman who'd sought to prove her authority through the humiliation of a child had lost everything in the process. The courthouse implemented new policies regarding food consumption, training for security personnel, and procedures for handling minor infractions. A plaque was installed in the main hallway, dedicated to the principle that justice must be tempered with mercy, and that the powerful must always protect the vulnerable. Some called it the Corey Williams Memorial, though the boy himself was very much alive and thriving. Corey returned to school a changed young man. The trauma of the handcuffs had been real, but so had the support of his community and the strength of his family. He'd learned lessons about justice, courage, and the importance of standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult. His weight remained a challenge, but he'd found new confidence in his ability to face adversity with dignity. The custody arrangement worked well for the Williams family. Corey's parents, shaken by the incident and its aftermath, had found new ways to cooperate and communicate. The boy who'd been caught between two households had become the bridge that helped them build a better co-parenting relationship. His ordeal had paradoxically brought his family closer together, united by their shared experience of injustice and their collective fight for accountability. Judge Hawthorne used the incident as a teaching moment for the entire legal community. She spoke at conferences about the importance of judicial leadership in protecting civil rights and the need for courts to be sanctuaries of justice rather than sources of trauma. Her handling of the situation became a model for other judges facing similar challenges, demonstrating that authority used wisely can heal rather than harm. The broader community had learned important lessons as well. The incident had exposed uncomfortable truths about bias, authority, and the vulnerability of children in institutional settings. But it had also demonstrated the power of collective action, the importance of accountability, and the possibility of meaningful change when people refuse to accept injustice as inevitable. A year later, Corey Williams was invited to speak at a conference on juvenile justice reform. Standing at the podium, looking out at an audience of judges, lawyers, and advocates, he spoke with the wisdom of someone who'd faced injustice and emerged stronger. What happened to me was wrong, but what happened after gives me hope. When people see injustice and decide to do something about it, change is possible. I'm not just a victim, I'm a survivor, and I'm proof that the system can work when good people make it work. The courthouse where Officer Nguyen had handcuffed a 12-year-old boy for eating a granola bar had become a symbol of something different, a place where justice could be delayed but not denied, where the powerful could be held accountable, and where the voice of a child could echo with the force of truth. The marble halls that had witnessed injustice had also witnessed its correction, and the story of Corey Williams had become a reminder that in America, even the smallest voice can demand the largest changes. The granola bar wrapper, long since discarded, had been just refuse on a courthouse floor. But the incident it had triggered had become part of the ongoing story of American justice, messy, imperfect, but ultimately capable of growth and redemption. Officer Nguyen's moment of poor judgment had cost her everything, but it had also created space for healing, learning, and the kind of change that makes society stronger. In the end, the courthouse returned to its daily rhythm of hearings, decisions, and the quiet drama of human lives seeking resolution. But something had changed in those marble halls, something that would echo through every case, every decision, every moment when authority met vulnerability. The ghost of handcuffs clicking around a child's wrists served as a permanent reminder that justice must always be tempered with mercy, that power must always be constrained by compassion, and that the true measure of a society lies not in its ability to punish the weak, but in its commitment to protect them. Corey Williams had eaten a granola bar and changed the world, one small bite at a time. His story would be told and retold, a modern parable about the importance of standing up for what's right, even when, especially when the person being wronged is just a child with no power except the power of truth itself. The courthouse had been a place of trauma, but it had also become a place of triumph, proving that even in the darkest moments, justice could still find a way to shine.